Dr. Chris Helali struck lucky, I suppose you'd say, when he spotted on the internet, on eBay, I think, the original black book of Jeffrey Epstein. And now a lot of people want to get their hands on it. It's not the main reason why I've got him here tonight, but I put him on notice. If we've got time, I'd love to hear that story. Dr. Chris Helali, elected official in the United States of America, researcher, political analyst and journalist. I bid you a good evening. You are most welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Let's start with how the 28-point plan has gone down. Amongst the American public, we know the Democrats are completely against it. Some of the Republican Party too. And we know the military-industrial complex and the military and media industrial complex will be hostile to it. Is Trump going to have the balls to stand firm on this, do you think?
Well, first and foremost, a good evening to you, my dear comrade, and to all of our listeners and viewers around the world. First and foremost, I think the apt analogy would be the Mir spacecraft when it was plummeting back to Earth after it had used up its life in outer space. And that's exactly where we're at right now. This Mir or peace proposal is crashing and burning in real time. And we've seen that the 28 proposal, we've seen the European counter proposal, which is 24. We've seen what the Russians are saying. And overall, we've seen a frustrated Trump tonight basically saying the Ukrainians are not grateful and he's going to put additional sanctions on Russia. So I don't quite know what we're to make of this whole situation. I think it was sort of a pie in the sky type scenario again for the U.S., kind of the delusions that continue and fester amongst some of those elite who want to see this war done. First, they said 24 hours, 48 hours. Who knows? Now it's been months and months, almost a year since Trump took office. And we still don't have a firm commitment on peace in Ukraine, because ultimately what Russia has asked for is the solving and the addressing of the root causes of this conflict, which the peace plan does not necessarily address. And that's something that is ongoing in terms of the negotiations. And of course, Russia has said, if we don't have a negotiated settlement diplomatically, we will, of course, achieve all the aims of the special military operation on the battlefield.
And General Winter has just arrived on the battlefield. The snows are here, and the Ukrainian armed forces are in a pretty bad shape, aren't they?
Yes, they're in a very bad shape. Actually, we have numerous reports, and I was just near the front line in the Kursk Oblast just some 2.5 weeks ago. And we saw that the Russian armed forces across the line of contact are making enormous advances. And really what we've seen out of the Ukrainians, especially out of the Ukrainian general staff, has been real concern that they're reaching that point. And there comes a point in every war where at some point, one side begins to weaken so much that their opponent begins to just plow through. And that's where the general staff has said we are. We're at the point where there's such a thin spread of Ukrainian soldiers, the inability to get new soldiers, the information just today that the Ukrainian foreign legions are going to be integrated into the assault units, into the storm units. That means that Colombians, French, Americans, British, Italians, whoever's fighting on the Ukrainian side is going to go on the front line, front line, in the trenches, not anymore in the rear to go and play mercenary and war tourists. So that ultimately means that the Ukrainians are in a very difficult position now. And they're having tremendous difficulty recruiting, filling those ranks. And also, this has become a war of drones. So the Russian drone capability has far outweighed, outmaneuvered, and outnumbered the Ukrainian capabilities. And of course, with the shutdown in the US that had happened, with ongoing concerns in Europe and in the US about supplying of weapons, and with a lot of weapons not reaching the front lines. As you might know, I interviewed 11 Ukrainian POWs who wanted to speak with me and were very open and candid and said, we never received any Western weaponry. We received only old Soviet weaponry. So all of these guns, all of these munitions, they're not even necessarily going to the front line. We don't even know where they're going. So that remains an ongoing concern. And I believe that this winter will be a pivotal turning point. If there's no diplomacy, continue to see the line of contact move ever so fast in the direction of Kiev, in the direction of other oblasts. And we're going to see, as the Russians continue to target energy infrastructure to try to pressure the Ukrainians into achieving the aims by military force, that eventually I think the Ukrainian side will have no choice. Either by victory on the battlefield or by negotiated settlement. They're going to have to swallow the poison pill. They're going to have to drink the hemlock on this one.
Our friend Larry Johnson has upped the ante on the gigantic corruption scandal now engulfing the regime in Kiev. Larry, former CIA analyst of high rank, a man of the shadows in his previous career. He has the contacts. He knows where the bodies are buried, even literally. He says that Zelensky has stolen $45 billion. No wonder the Western weapons weren't reaching the front. Things were not even hitting the ground in Ukraine before they were in the back of a Mercedes-Benz and off across the border to God knows where.
You're absolutely right. Not only that, I've spoken also with Larry when we were here together just a few weeks ago, and also with Rick Sanchez. And we have reported billions of dollars of weaponry have come into the border of Ukraine and subsequently left the border of Ukraine to go to places like Syria, like Mali, and other parts and other conflicts where the Ukrainians are basically washing the dirty laundry of the Americans and the Europeans in their hybrid war against Russia, against China, and against other multipolar powers, you could say, or anti-imperialist powers. So we've seen that Ukrainians have armed and trained the Syrian jihadists. We've seen them arm and train jihadists in the Sahel. We've seen them arm and train any group that is antagonistic to Russia or China or other groups. And why? Because Ukraine has effectively become not only a mafia state, not only a rogue state in this way, but it has become the clearinghouse for all of the dirty deeds of the Americans and the Europeans. And I've said that for the past few years. We've had a clear understanding. People have gone and gotten very rich by basically selling substandard military products to the Ukrainians, with the American and European taxpayer footing the bill. And that's been documented to the tune of billions of dollars. Now, with Mindich and Zelensky and all of their cronies in the inner circle taking percentages of up to 15, 20, 25% per deal, we're talking about billions of dollars. And Larry Johnson might be spot on with that number, because as we know, and you rightfully pointed it out, and I've given you credit many times, like in Iraq, when they sent pallets of cash that weren't metered or measured or counted, the same has been done in Kiev. They've sent plane loads of cash, and you've seen that in the report. It's not even a conspiracy theory. Mindich, the money that was seized was in basically these plastic sealed, vacuum sealed packages. They came straight from Kansas City, from St. Louis or wherever, and they were on pallets on C-130s or C-17s. That's to show you the level of corruption and depravity. And we've seen the women who are in relationships or being intimate with high political and military leaders in Ukraine living a life of luxury in places like Malta, in places like Monaco, in places where the rich and the elite continue to enjoy the lavish lifestyle that they lead. Of course, they're leading that lavish lifestyle on the dime of the American and European taxpayer. That's the biggest scandal in this. Not only the millions of dead that were unnecessary or wounded, but the fact that this has been the largest money laundering operation that we've seen since the war on terror began with what happened in Iraq. And I believe that this is a major crime and a major story, and more of us will continue to investigate as the months and years continue.
Now, you were a fighter, a former military officer. Can you answer me this? Why would the ordinary Ukrainian soldier continue to fight for a gang like Zelensky's gang. Of course, I respect absolutely any man, woman who are defending their own land, their own country, their families, and so on. I respect that whether I'm on their side or I'm not. But if you say to me, keep on fighting, keep on sending your sons to a front line where they will not last long, to defend a regime as rotten as any that has ever lived anywhere at any time. Why?
I think that's a huge question. And I think that what you're seeing on your social media, what you're seeing on your television screen shows that they are not fighting anymore because of love of their country and for patriotism, because most of them have understood that this war is not a war that is patriotic. It's not a war in defense of their lives. It's in defense of this ruling clique that's in Kiev, that's backed by the West. And when I spoke to Ukrainian POWs, you've seen the videos. All of the people on the front line now have been, for the most part, forcibly mobilized, captured in their underpants, captured taking their kids to school, captured going to the supermarket to buy milk for their young babies, captured on the way to take care of their granny in the nursing home. They have been stolen from the streets, even from their jobs, plucked from their jobs and thrown into military training. And when I spoke to those Ukrainian POWs, two of them said one was sent to France and one was sent to the United Kingdom. This is a big story that's coming up. Two of them were sent through Poland to get training in France and the UK. The training lasted 35 days. And when they came back across the border, they were sent directly to the trenches. Imagine that, 35 days from a civilian life to the frontline trenches of one of the biggest military conflicts in our world today. And you know what they did? They said, when we saw the Russians, we threw down our weapons and we went straight to them. Because they said it was sure death. Nobody's going to survive that front line for very long. So they went to the front line, they went to the Russian side, and what they found was shocking. The Russians gave them food, water, medical aid, and allowed them to contact their families. When they contacted their families, the Ukrainians' intelligence went to those family members and said, do not communicate anymore with your relative. That's the level where we're at in this conflict right now, where people who don't agree with the government are being forcibly mobilized by the tens of thousands, sent into the meat grinder to defend this clique that is embezzling billions of dollars and sending young lives and even older lives. There were plenty of guys with gray hair there that were POWs. And they said it was a horror show. No training, no real gear, and it was just basically go. And you know, I want to reveal to your listeners how depraved this Ukrainian regime is. When they went to the front line, before they even were sent into battle, their families had already received missing person notices. Why? Because in Ukraine, the Ukrainian government doesn't have to pay the family if they're missing. That's the level of corruption. They even won't pay for their own dead, and they embezzle and steal that money that belongs to the family of those who die or are captured in the war. Just to show you the level of corruption that we're dealing with here. And it comes straight from the sources that I've been able to speak with throughout this special military operation. And it has been an unbelievable window into the fraud and the gangsterism that goes on the Ukrainian side in this conflict.
What's your best guess on what's going to happen now? The Europeans, as you say, have mounted a counter-peace offensive. Their peace proposals, 24 points, are perfectly laughable. Even the 28 points of Trump would not have solved the problem. Shrink that down to 24 points and begin to ship some of the European text into an American text, and you've got a non-starter. That's how it looks to me. I think we'll still be, God willing, having this conversation next Thanksgiving, never mind this one. What say you?
I agree with you. I agree 100%. Basically, we have a situation where the Russians are saying, okay, we are open to dialogue and we're open to peace, but peace on our terms. Because we didn't start this conflict, right? We didn't do the Euromaidan coup. We didn't bomb civilians in Donbass from 2014 to 2022. And we didn't give so much blood and treasure and sacrifice so much as a nation to then become humiliated at the negotiating table. This is not going to be a victory for Donald Trump and the Europeans. This will be a victory for the Russian people, ultimately, and for the peace-loving people of Ukraine who didn't want this to begin with, who were totally okay with speaking Russian, with the church, with celebrating May 9th, and with celebrating their great heritage, right? As part of the greater Russian world, Russian civilization, of which Ukraine has been a part of since the beginning. So I think that we definitely will be having this conversation, because if the Americans and the Europeans are continuing on their course, they do not want to address the root causes. And speaking about conditions of the Ukrainian army, keeping them at 600,000, talking about the seizing of Russian assets to the tune of $100 billion, I don't think that we're going to see any peace agreement anytime soon. Until the Americans and the Europeans won't do it, because the Europeans will lose their power. They've built up their whole power and reputation on Russophobia. Trump, not as much. But at this point, like you said, there are so many vested interests, military, industrial, economic, and political interests at play. They don't want to let this go too easy. And they want to continue this because it's good for business. Why not? Who's to stop them? Who's going to stop Ursula von der Leyen? Who's going to stop Merz and Macron? They're going to continue. And they're going to continue to give their people's money and continue to buy American weaponry. And America can wash its hands like Pontius Pilate and say, we're actually not arming, but they are arming through Europeans, the Ukrainian regime.
Now, just in the few minutes left to us, I hadn't quite grasped the importance, though you had actually mentioned it to me, of your extraordinary find on eBay. Tell us about it and tell us what happens with it next.
Sure. Like you and many others, I enjoy, of course, doing research. I enjoy, combing the internet for all sorts of little snippets of information, trying to piece together the puzzle that is, I think, the world that we live in, and especially the intelligence networks and all of the deep, dark secrets. And as I was doing that, looking for the first book that was published by Nick Bryan via Gawker, I stumbled upon this eBay listing from a woman in San Francisco who said that she was in the 90s, some sort of like musician hanging around New York. She was on Fifth Avenue. She saw a guy get in a limousine, dropped the book. She picked up the book. She looked inside some big famous names. She didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein was, but she put it and she kept it. And a decade later, when the Epstein stuff came to light, she tried to start, selling it and giving it away and telling people this is very important. She contacted the New York Times, Washington Post. Nobody would touch it. She put it on eBay. She needed new tires. I told her, listen, I'll take a risk. I won't pay $500. I'll pay $400 plus $25 express shipping, because my wife at the time would have killed me, would have hung me out to dry if, I spent all this money on a forgery. But I took the risk because her story sounded so plausible. I said it couldn't be fabricated. And when I got the book and I opened it up, because I have worked in archives and I'm a historian by trade, I knew it was real. I instantly called the people that I knew, Nick Bryan, contacted Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald, who was the Pulitzer Prize winner, who won the whole thing about the Epstein case. And they all told me who to go to, who to contact. We authenticated the book through forensic analysis. And then we were able to start to track down the people in the book. And there are big names, over 200 people we didn't know were connected to the Epstein world. And I'm still doing investigation on one such person who I think is going to be a bombshell when it goes live about what's going on in that circle, in that elite circle, even around President Trump to date. But the most important thing is that I just received word from Congress, from the great Council of the House of Representatives, of which Thomas Massie is leading an enormous crusade along with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I have provided the book, a copy of the book to them, plus my deposition and all information, so I can continue to shed light on this network. Maybe we won't get the full story, but I hope that many of us will continue to delve deep, because you and I both know that there's a lot more to this story than just what we know on the surface. And the connections and the links are world important and world shattering once they are exposed, if we can get there.